Money flow like a river, property drinks no quiver.
The question is, what is asbestos and how it can destroy your budget for your project? Let's have a look. Asbestos is not a man-made material. It's a mineral that is found in nature and used to be mined to be used in property development and refurbishment. That was banned in 2000 in the UK and 1980s in the USA. So you see a big gap of 20 years that it took the UK to catch up with such an important regulation. Now, as you can see on the image, the asbestos fibers and minerals are kind of needles, and they can break into more needles, even microscopic needles. And that's where the problem is. These needles, the tiniest one, the smallest ones of all, can become airborne and then go into people's lungs. And there is actually where the problem happens. Here you can see a picture under the microscope of how these fibers look. Effectively, they are like needles, like long fibers. And again, they can break into more fibers of the same shape. And they go into somebody's lungs. This is a normal lung. This is how a lung with asbestos looks like. And then in the worst case, it can even get to this point, which is causing cancer. And most of the time, or some of the first effects of asbestos in somebody's lung is because these are kind of needles. They actually damage the lung surface and create scars. And these scars are not flexible. They stop the lung or damage the lung. So when you breathe, it becomes difficult. Lungs are supposed to be flexible, and asbestos just stop that. And the more you have, obviously, the more difficult it is for you or for the worker who was in that property to breathe. And therefore, this become such a big problem that it was banned. And unfortunately, because it takes a long time for this to happen, it was only found after it actually made a lot of damage. Now, where in a property you can find them? You can find them in ceilings, in artex, for example, these kind of ceilings or walls which have some sort of surface to it, like some sort of design. Let me show you. This sort of surface and designs, this is artex, and they may or may not contain that sort of asbestos. And therefore, you need to be careful. The problem here is that you wouldn't really know if you have asbestos or not unless you pay for a proper survey. They take actual samples of the walls, of the tiles, of the ceiling, and any other place where it was commonly used, take it to a laboratory and test it. They will do that. They will charge you at least £400 for the privilege of getting that tested, and they will give you the results in around 48 hours. Now, what the problem is here, if you do the survey without disturbing anything, like you did it at the beginning of the refurbishment process, then you would have to spend, depending on the size of the property, 2-4 weeks to remove all those asbestos. But if you discover them during the refurbishment of the process of the property, and then some of this is actually disturbed, and let's say a ceiling falls down and then contaminates the whole air with asbestos, then the cleaning becomes more expensive. Now, by now it's probably obvious for you how this is going to affect or destroy a budget that you initially created. And first of all, if you find this asbestos, you need to stop the refurbishment, because you shouldn't have, and this is a legal thing actually, you shouldn't have workers there working as the asbestos are removed for obvious reasons that we just showed. Now, the important thing in this is to do it with time, so you can get a removal into the schedule. Normally, asbestos companies are busy because the amount of properties that you find in the market in the UK with asbestos is actually quite a lot, and they are busy, so you need to build this within the schedule. Now, if you didn't include this into the budget, at least the contingency, which is the aspect, is the main theme of this video, then it's probably going to eat any contingency that you had. Now, when you pay for removal, qualified people will come to your property, will remove carefully those asbestos so you can continue with the project, and they will dispose in a controlled manner of those asbestos. They can just not be thrown into the skip. Now, this is a property, the one you see here with the open door, that we are starting to refurbish. And because the bank requested to do this report for the loan, and that normally can happen for you when you are requesting a loan, we had to do this survey, and we were actually quite sure we were going to find asbestos. Fortunately, we didn't, because this would have taken at least 4-6 weeks to do the removal. And we had not included it into the budget because we looked around, we didn't think there was. Now, the property you see on the picture is one we are converting now from a normal residential property into a 5-bed, 5-bathroom HMO. And as a request from the bank, we had to do this asbestos before we started any refurbishment. Now, we didn't know whether or not we were going to find asbestos, but if we did, that would have meant that this refurbishment would have been extended by 4 to 6 weeks, and it would have costed around £10,000 at least to remove all this asbestos. We paid for this survey. They went there, took samples of the different areas in the house, which I'll show you the report in a second. And they tested it in a laboratory. They found there was no asbestos. But let's have a look how an asbestos report looks like for you to be more familiar with this and hopefully apply this information for the safety of your workers and for your project. So effectively, you can also think about your contingency when you buy one of these old houses and hopefully doesn't destroy your budget, which is the reason why I'm trying to do this video. So you take this into account because it's one of those hidden traps that you find at a later stage when you buy a property in the UK, these old properties, and then those are the ones that eat your contingency. Well, the contingency is there for that. When you go and see a property, it's impossible to start breaking into walls or floors to check in a meaningful way so you can find all this. Normally, sellers don't have that patience and they don't allow you to touch anything. So that's one of the constraints of these sort of purchases. But let's have a look. Now, the first thing to notice about this survey is quite a lengthy report. This report actually has 35 pages, and a lot of that is probably normal information they need to put in there. But one of the first one I want to draw your attention to is this, which is this is an intrusive survey and is required by the construction design and design management regulations, which is called the CDM, which you basically can see around here, this bit here, CDM regulations. And therefore, the management of asbestos needs to be included, and the reasons are obvious, which I already explained. Now, the other part of this sort of survey you need to take into account is got limitations. They cannot go into every single corner in the property because this is a destructive test. They need to drill into different areas to get a sample and get it tested. And one of those examples is fire doors. The reason asbestos were used in the past is because they were cheap and they were fire retardant. So they are good against fire. And therefore, some fire doors, all fire doors would use this sort of asbestos in the core. And one of the limitations of this survey is that they won't drill into those sort of doors because obviously they would be causing a great damage to the property. And those doors as such, because it's in the core and then normally a door, you take it on and off unless you are cutting the bottom to fix the gaps for the far installation, then it wouldn't be touched. But those limitations exist in these sort of surveys. Something else for you to notice from this survey, and something you'll see in different buildings, which actually I think I want to stop to show you a little bit of, is this sort of label that you see here, warning contains asbestos. If you go to an old building and you see these sort of stickers here, you see the one that says warning contains asbestos. This is the one I mean. Now, this is the very important part of the asbestos, of an asbestos test or survey. They will actually test the different areas. In this case, they tested the wall. Do you see this kind of pattern, Artex type of surface on the walls? That could be an indication that there is asbestos, but actually it's just an indication. There might not be. In this case, there wasn't. Another sample they took was from basically the ceiling, where they actually took an asbestos sample and they didn't find anything. This was the ceiling kitchen, and luckily they didn't find anything. But you also can see the pattern here, which you could expect. There is asbestos in here, and actually, in many cases, there are. And that's why you need to be careful and put this into your contingency. But again, luckily, on this, there wasn't. This was another sample that we took from the landing, or they took from the landing for asbestos, and there was no findings of asbestos. The walls, again, no asbestos found, which is really, really good. And this is the loft, the void insulation, and then no asbestos was found or were found in the process as such. As I said before, when they take the samples from the property, they will take them to a laboratory. In this case, was a location called Shot On Site Laboratory, as you can see here, and basically they follow the same sort of tests and protocols they need to test to find or to determine this as asbestos. And this is a very good report and proof that there are or there aren't asbestos, which actually we had to send to the bank for the loan, because this was one of the requirements for the bank to take for the loan. And this is kind of the location where the asbestos were taken from, as you can see. And it's a very, very much detailed report in terms of what could be. And there are more evidence of site photographs. This is the actual refurbishment we are doing. Now that we have this report, now we can continue the refurbishment of the property. Then there are some summaries and some information that we'll actually have to do. And this is a good site to have. This here, non-found. What happened if the property would have contained asbestos? Let's have a look. An important aspect of how much it's going to cost you remove the asbestos from your property is the size of the property and the extension of it, of the extension of the presence of asbestos in your property. If we go to a scenario where you have asbestos in different areas, then it's going to cost more. If all your ceilings are made of asbestos or at least contain asbestos, it's going to be more expensive. Let's start with a property that is about, let's say, 140 square meters, which is not abnormal for a property you want to convert. In this case, which we are doing into a 5-bed HMO with 5 bathrooms. That's not uncommon. That's kind of the size that you need. Now, if you found this in the middle of the refurbishment and then it is an emergency, it's going to cost you more. But let's say for the first example, is something that you planned, something that you found in advance, and something that you're going to do with time. So we leave in this calculator that I'm showing you here, we leave just no, it's not a rushed job. Now, depending on the survey that you do, it could be £350, or which could be a refurbishment survey, which is what we paid. In this case, is £800. That's the first cost for that process, which again can be triggered by the bank, or can be triggered by the CDM manager, or can it be triggered by yourself, or even if it wasn't planned ahead, by a finding during the refurbishment process. Now, let's take for this example a case where we have textured ceilings, which the coverage percentage of the total area of asbestos is about 80%, what you have here. And then let's say you also have vinyl floor tiles, which contain, let's say, 45%. But also you have a garage roof, which contains garage in cement. Asbestos were also used in this case. And let's say you're going to disturb that. It's approximately 150 pounds in a single garage. That's what you have there. Let's go with the worst case scenario, and you have pipe lagging, which also contains asbestos. And let's say you found about 17 meters, okay? Just to make it worse. AIB panels, which is door and boxing, let's say you only have 5 square meters, 8 square meters. This is what it is. So the reason I show you this is because for you to understand that asbestos can be found in different areas in the property, and it depends on the coverage and the extension of the presence of that asbestos in your property is going to dictate how much it's going to take. So in this case, if you have this sort of configuration for your asbestos, then we're talking about easily about £17,000 and 22 days that is going to take around is going to take to remove that asbestos. And there you see is 22 days, which if you're paying for a loan of a property like the one we are paying, which is about £1,000 per month, then you need to add this on top of it because the refurbishment is completely stopped. Nobody can work there in the meantime. The removal is done. And then the extension of the findings plus the surveys and all of that can easily destroy a budget. So if we are talking about 17, 18, 20,000 pounds extra money in a budget like for this property, which we are we considered at the beginning to be, or we calculated, which about £90,000, which is going to cost to refurbish this property from where you see it to the point it can be rented and licensed, then is a massive amount of money. Is about 20%, easily 18, 20% of the whole money, the whole budget that it's needed for that. And we only, to begin with, or normally the contingency is set to 10, 15%. And in of that asbestos finding you didn't plan for, you're going to spend already 20% of that money, then the budget is completely destroyed. And the profitability of the project is already affected greatly. That's why I've done this video, because if we would have found asbestos in this property and it would have been at this sort of extension level in the property, then what would have happened is the budget would have gone out of the window, and then the return on investment that's been calculated for the project completely destroyed and decreased a lot. Now, hopefully this video gave you a good understanding of what asbestos are. It showed you why it's so dangerous. It shows you what a report is, or how a report looks like, and how dangerous it could be for your project. Hopefully this creates some awareness in terms of such projects and how you can include this in future budgets for your projects, HMOs, or any old properties refurbishments. Hopefully I've just gave you a little bit of advice on this, so you kind of, as an investor, reduce the risk by thinking ahead, because that's what we do. So hopefully that's a good addition to your toolbox now that you've seen this. To finish, my usual message: if you have properties in Liverpool or Wirral that you want to manage, please send me a message at info@propertycashflow.co.uk. If you want to invest in those areas as sort of a project like the one I showed you today, please send me a message to info@propertycashflow.co.uk or send me a WhatsApp message in 07411 904 124, and then I'll happy to start a conversation either way. Any other questions as well, please comment, please subscribe, and just follow. And if you have any comments on this, any learnings that you can or you want to share, because I don't know everything, I'm learning as I go, and every project that we've done brings something new, which is actually the exciting part of investing in property, then by all means, we are all learning from each other. So thank you very much for your time today, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.